London, April 1812. Miss Katherine Jennings stood alone in the vestibule of St. George's Church, her wedding gown rustling softly as she paced the marble floor. The fashionable white muslin, adorned with delicate lace and seed pearls, had cost her father a small fortune, but what good was it now? The clock had just struck 11, and still there was no sign of her betrothed. "Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding about the time," suggested her lady's maid, Martha, though her voice lacked conviction. Katherine smoothed her gloved hands over the gown's empire waistline, a hollow sensation spreading in her stomach. No misunderstanding. Mr. Pemberton was most particular about setting the ceremony for 10 o'clock. She swallowed hard. "He is not coming." Her father, Sir William Jennings, burst through the church doors, his face flushed with anger. "Not a word from Pemberton or his family. The guests are beginning to whisper. Your mother is beside herself." Katherine lifted her chin, though her heart pounded painfully. "Then we must inform them that there will be no wedding today." "Impossible. The scandal would ruin us." Her father paced frantically. "Your dowry is substantial, but not enough to overcome the stain of being jilted at the altar." The terrible truth settled over Katherine. At 23, she was already considered firmly on the shelf by society standards. This match with Mr. Pemberton, a gentleman of modest means but respectable family, had been her last chance at securing a husband. She had convinced herself that marriage was nothing more than a practical arrangement, affection was a luxury few could afford. Now she faced the ultimate humiliation. "Father, we cannot keep everyone waiting indefinitely," she said quietly. Before Sir William could respond, the church doors swung open again. Katherine's heart leaped, then immediately fell when she saw it was not Mr. Pemberton but her cousin Anne. "Katherine!" Anne rushed forward, clutching a letter. "This just arrived at your home." The messenger was directed to deliver it there rather than to the church. With trembling fingers, Katherine broke the seal. "Miss Jennings, circumstances have arisen that make our union impossible. My affections have been engaged elsewhere for some time, and I find I cannot in good conscience proceed with our arrangement. The settlement papers remain unsigned. Yours respectfully, Henry Pemberton." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, but Katherine refused to let them fall. Society already labelled her a spinster, she would not add a pathetic to their assessment. "He has found someone else," she announced, her voice remarkably steady. "Someone younger, no doubt. Or richer." She handed the letter to her father, whose face darkened to a dangerous shade of purple. "That fortune-hunting scoundrel." Sir William crumpled the letter. After all the arrangements, the expense, Katherine placed a steadying hand on her father's arm. "Please, father. We must address the guests." The great doors to the nave stood before her like the entrance to a lion's den. Beyond them waited the cream of London society, all assembled to witness her greatest humiliation. The moment she walked through those doors unmarried, the whispers would begin. By evening, her abandonment would be the talk of every drawing-room in Mayfair. Taking a deep breath, Katherine squared her shoulders. If she must endure this, she would do so with dignity. As the doors opened, Katherine was confronted with rows of curious faces turning toward her. Her mother's quiet sob from the front pew was audible in the hushed silence. Before Sir William could speak, the rear doors of the church burst open with a thunderous crack. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the morning light, his greatcoat billowing dramatically. "I beg your pardon for the interruption," called a deep voice that sent a ripple through the assembled guests. Whispers erupted throughout the church. "The Duke of Stanwick! What is he doing here? Ravensdale never attends weddings." Katherine stared in bewilderment as the most eligible bachelor in England strode down the aisle toward her. His Grace Richard Ravensdale, the Duke of Stanwick, was known throughout society for his wealth, his impeccable lineage, and his resolute avoidance of matrimony. At 32, he had skillfully evaded every matchmaking mama and ambitious debutante in London for over a decade. He came to a halt before Katherine, executing a flawless bow. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a startling shade of blue, like a summer sky after rain. His dark hair was swept back from a face that, while not conventionally handsome, possessed a commanding quality that demanded attention. "Miss Jennings," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the church. "I apologize for my lateness. I trust the ceremony has not proceeded without me." Katherine gaped at him. "Your Grace, Richard." Lady Stanwick, the Duke's formidable aunt, rose from her seat near the back of the church. "What is the meaning of this?" The Duke turned to address the bewildered congregation. "I must beg the indulgence of everyone present. It seems there has been a grave misunderstanding. Mr. Pemberton," he pronounced the name with undisguised contempt, "has been called away on urgent business abroad. Knowing of my long-standing admiration for Miss Jennings, he requested that I explain his absence." Katherine's eyes widened at this blatant falsehood. She had never exchanged more than a few words with the Duke at social gatherings, and certainly had never detected any admiration in his manner. "Indeed," continued the Duke smoothly, "I believe this turn of events may be considered providential. For I have long wished for an opportunity to speak with Miss Jennings regarding a matter of great personal importance." Before Katherine could protest, the Duke had taken her gloved hand and drawn her slightly away from her father. "Play along," he murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Unless you prefer to face their pity." Katherine's mind raced. Whatever game the Duke was playing, it offered an escape from the immediate catastrophe of public humiliation. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Duke announced, "while we cannot proceed with the intended ceremony today, I hope you will join me in congratulating Miss Jennings on having avoided an unsuitable match. Pemberton is a man of questionable character and finances. Miss Jennings deserves far better." An astonished murmur swept through the church. "If you will excuse us," he continued, offering Katherine his arm, "Miss Jennings and I have matters to discuss that cannot wait." Without waiting for a response, he led her down the aisle and out of the church, past rows of astounded faces. Katherine caught a glimpse of her mother's expression, shocked but calculating, and her father's, bewildered but hopeful. The sudden appearance of a duke, especially one as wealthy as Stanwick, had transformed disaster into intriguing gossip. Once outside, the Duke handed her into his waiting carriage with the Stanwick crest emblazoned on the door. Only when they had pulled away from the church did Katherine find her voice. "Your Grace, while I appreciate your intervention, I must ask what you think you are doing." The Duke settled back against the luxurious squabs. "Rescuing you from social ruin, Miss Jennings. You may thank me at your leisure." "Thank you." Katherine's composure finally cracked. "You have created a spectacle that will have the town buzzing for weeks. They will assume," she broke off, horrified at the implications, "that I have romantic intentions toward you." He raised one dark eyebrow. "Precisely. Far better than having them pity you as the spinster abandoned at the altar, wouldn't you agree?" Katherine stared at him, anger replacing her shock. "You presume too much, Your Grace. I do not recall requesting your assistance. Nonetheless, you received it." His smile was infuriatingly confident. "Now, shall we discuss terms?" "Terms?" Katherine repeated faintly. "For our charade. I propose we allow society to believe I am courting you. After an appropriate interval, perhaps a month, we will amicably part ways." You will emerge from this debacle with your reputation not only intact but enhanced. Katherine narrowed her eyes. And what do you gain from this arrangement, Your Grace? For the first time, a flicker of something genuine crossed his face. Was it discomfort? Let us say I have my reasons. Primarily, a respite from the parade of débutantes thrust in my path this season. If I am known to be pursuing you, others will keep their distance. How flattering, Katherine said dryly. You wish to use me as a shield against matrimony. The Duke laughed, a rich sound that Katherine found unexpectedly appealing. We use each other, Miss Jennings. Is that not what society marriages are, transactions of mutual benefit? His words echoed her own cynical view so precisely that Katherine was momentarily taken aback. Even so, I failed to see how this plan could possibly succeed. We hardly know one another. A situation easily remedied. We shall be seen together at social events. I will call upon you. We will dance, converse, drive in the park. All the expected behaviors of a courtship. And after a month, we simply end this charade. Precisely. You decline my suit, gently, of course. Society will assume you found me wanting in some respect. Your selectivity will only increase your value on the marriage mart. Katherine considered his proposal. The alternative was returning home in disgrace, facing the pitying calls of friends and the malicious whispers of enemies. At least this way, she might salvage some dignity from the wreckage of her plans. Very well, Your Grace. I accept your proposal, your false proposal, that is. Excellent. He rapped on the roof of the carriage. Driver, to Berkeley Square. My parents' home is in Grosvenor Street, Katherine protested. Indeed. However, I believe we should first establish the parameters of our arrangement over tea at my aunt's residence. Lady Stanwick's approval will be crucial to our success. The Ton respects her judgment implicitly. Katherine sighed. This day had taken such a bizarre turn that having tea with a duchess while still in her wedding gown seemed almost reasonable by comparison. As the carriage rolled through London's fashionable streets, Katherine studied her unexpected companion. The Duke of Stanwick was known to be brilliant, wealthy, and utterly disinterested in marriage. What had possessed him to involve himself in her affairs? Why did you really intervene, Your Grace? She asked suddenly. The truth, if you please. His blue eyes met hers directly. I despise seeing anyone made a public spectacle. Particularly someone who faced it with such composure. He paused. And Pemberton is a known scoundrel who deserved exposure. When I saw him departing London late last night with the widowed Lady Harwick, I surmised his intentions regarding your wedding. You knew I was to be abandoned, yet you waited until the last moment to act. The Duke had the grace to look somewhat abashed. I sent a message to your home first thing this morning, but evidently it arrived too late. I came to the church as soon as I confirmed Pemberton had fled the city. Katherine considered this. So this was an impulsive rescue? Not your usual style, I think, Your Grace. Perhaps I am not as calculating as society believes. His smile held a challenge. And perhaps you are not as resigned to spinsterhood as you appear. The carriage stopped before an imposing townhouse. As a footman opened the door, the Duke extended his hand to Katherine. Shall we begin our performance, Miss Jennings? Taking his hand, Katherine stepped from the carriage, her wedding gown gleaming in the spring sunshine. I believe we already have, Your Grace. Tea with Lady Stanwick proved surprisingly pleasant. The Duchess, a handsome woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a forthright manner, received the explanation of their courtship with raised eyebrows but made no direct challenge. So Pemberton showed his true colours at last, she remarked, pouring tea. I warned your mother about him last season, but she was determined to see you settled. Katherine nearly choked on her tea. You knew Mr. Pemberton was untrustworthy. My dear, I make it my business to know the character of every eligible gentleman in London. Pemberton has gambling debts that would make your hair curl. Lady Stanwick cast an appraising eye over Katherine's wedding ensemble. A lovely gown, though perhaps now associated with unfortunate memories. We must have Madame Delacour fashion you something spectacular for the Hartington ball next week. The Hartington ball? Katherine echoed. The Duke, who had been quietly observing their exchange, spoke up. The first public appearance of our courtship, naturally. The entire ton will be present. Lady Stanwick nodded approvingly. By then, the story will have spread. Katherine rescued from an unworthy match by Richard's timely intervention. Romantic, unexpected, and entirely advantageous to both your reputations. Katherine marvelled at how quickly her disastrous wedding day had transformed into a strategic social campaign. I had not intended to attend the Hartington ball. My parents may have reservations about— Nonsense, Lady Stanwick interrupted. Your parents will be delighted. A potential connection to the Stanwick dukedom? Sir William's ambitions could reach no higher. My aunt rarely minces words, the Duke said with a wry smile. But she is rarely wrong. As predicted, Katherine's parents raised no objections to the new arrangement. Indeed, her mother was positively ecstatic when Katherine returned home that afternoon. The Duke of Stanwick! Lady Jennings exclaimed for perhaps the 10th time, pacing their drawing-room. To think that Pemberton's disgraceful behaviour has led to such an opportunity. It is beyond fortunate, it is providential. Katherine watched her mother with mixed emotions. Mamma, you must not raise your hopes. The Duke has been explicit that this is merely a courtesy to spare me embarrassment. He has no true intention of marriage. Of course not, dear, her mother replied, though her expression said she believed nothing of the sort. But consider, no one has succeeded in engaging the Duke's interest in over a decade. That he would go to such lengths for you must signify something. Katherine sighed. It signifies that he has an excessive sense of chivalry and perhaps enjoys defying social expectations. Nothing more. But over the following days, Katherine found herself wondering if there might indeed be something more to the Duke's interest. His calls at the Jennings household were punctual and proper, yet there was an ease to their conversations that surprised her. He was well-read, with opinions on everything from agricultural improvements to the latest Gothic novels. More surprising still was his willingness to listen to her views, even when they differed from his own. On their third such visit, as they sat in the drawing-room under her mother's watchful eye, Katherine found herself enjoying their verbal sparring. You cannot seriously defend Mrs. Radcliffe's improbable plots, she insisted, setting down her teacup with emphasis. I defend not their probability but their effect, the Duke countered. A well-crafted atmosphere of suspense can overcome many logical flaws. Perhaps for the undiscerning reader. The Duke laughed. You wound me, Miss Jennings. I had thought my literary taste beyond reproach. No one's taste is beyond reproach, Your Grace. Not even a Duke's. His eye sparkled with appreciation of her riposte. How fortunate that I chose a false betrothed who keeps me humble. The word betrothed sent an unexpected flutter through Katherine's stomach. She reminded herself sternly that this was all pretense, a social convenience that would end as planned after a suitable interval. The Hartington ball arrived, and with it Katherine's first public appearance since her aborted wedding. Despite her protestations, Lady Stanwick had indeed arranged for Madame Delacour to create a new gown for her, a confection of ivory silk with gold embroidery that made Katherine look, in the dressmaker's words, like a duchess already. Lady Jennings nearly wept with joy when she saw her daughter descend the stairs. "Oh, Katherine! You look magnificent. The Duke will be enchanted." "The Duke is well aware this is not a real courtship, Mamma," Katherine reminded her, though she could not help admiring her reflection. The gown was the finest she had ever worn, the fabric shimmering in the candlelight. When the Duke arrived to escort them, his appreciative gaze sent warmth blooming across Katherine's cheeks. "Miss Jennings, you outshine every star in the heavens," he said, bowing over her hand. "I believe that is what gentlemen are obliged to say to ladies in evening dress, Your Grace," she replied lightly. "Perhaps. But I rarely say what obligation dictates." His voice dropped lower. "You are truly beautiful tonight." Katherine was saved from having to reply by her mother's effusive greetings and her father's arrival. Soon they were in the Duke's carriage, en route to what Katherine knew would be a decisive evening. Their entrance at the Hartington mansion would set the tone for all subsequent gossip. "Remember," the Duke murmured as they approached the receiving line, "you are not the jilted bride but the discerning lady who has attracted the attention of one of England's most selective bachelors." "A role requiring considerable acting skill," Katherine retorted, but she straightened her shoulders and adopted a serene expression. Their entrance caused exactly the sensation the Duke had predicted. Conversations paused as heads turned to observe them. Katherine kept her gaze steady, her hand resting lightly on the Duke's arm as they moved through the glittering ballroom. "Lady Harford at 2 o'clock, the Duke whispered, approaching with clear interrogative intent. Katherine suppressed a laugh at his military terminology. Lady Harford was indeed bearing down on them with determined curiosity written across her plump features. "Your Grace! Miss Jennings!" Lady Harford exclaimed. "How delightful to see you both. Such an unexpected pairing." "Is it?" the Duke replied smoothly. "I find it most natural. Miss Jennings combines intelligence with beauty, a rare combination indeed." "Quite," Lady Harford agreed, though her expression suggested skepticism. "I was so distressed to hear of your unfortunate experience last week, Miss Jennings." Mr. Pemberton's behavior was beyond the pale. Katherine smiled graciously. "As it happens, Lady Harford, I consider myself fortunate. Had the wedding proceeded, I might never have discovered Mr. Pemberton's true character, nor had the opportunity to become better acquainted with his Grace." The Duke's hand pressed approvingly against hers where it rested on his arm. "Miss Jennings displays remarkable resilience. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe I was promised the first dance." As they moved away, Katherine exhaled. "One down, several dozen more to go, I expect." "You handled her perfectly. Neither bitter about Pemberton nor overeager about me. Exactly the right note. I am gratified by your approval of my performance, Your Grace." The Duke led her to the dance floor as the musicians struck up a waltz. "It is not your performance I approve of, but your genuine dignity. Many women would be crushed by what you endured." As they began to dance, Katherine found herself surprisingly comfortable in his arms. For a large man, he moved with remarkable grace, guiding her through the turns with confident ease. "I was crushed," she admitted quietly. "But I refused to show it. I learned long ago that society has little patience for a woman's genuine emotions." The Duke studied her face. "When did you learn that lesson?" Katherine hesitated, then decided honesty might make their pretense more convincing. "When I was 19. I formed an attachment to a gentleman who seemed to return my regard. He courted me for an entire season, then abruptly transferred his attentions to an heiress with £50,000. Ah! The Duke's expression darkened. And Pemberton was a practical choice. After several seasons without suitable offers, one becomes realistic about one's prospects. By realistic, you mean willing to settle for less than you deserve. Katherine stiffened slightly. I mean recognizing that marriage is primarily a social contract, not a romantic fantasy. Affection may develop over time, but compatibility of situation and temperament are more reliable foundations. A remarkably dispassionate view for a young lady. Perhaps. But a practical one. The Duke executed a particularly graceful turn. And yet, even practical marriages require basic integrity. Pemberton failed that test. Yes, Katherine agreed. Though in retrospect, there were signs I chose to ignore. Such as his excessive interest in my dowry arrangements. His reluctance to introduce me to certain of his associates. She sighed. His obvious boredom whenever I expressed opinions on books or politics. The Duke's hand tightened slightly at her waist. A man who finds your opinions boring is a man of limited intelligence. The unexpected compliment flustered Katherine momentarily. You need not flatter me, Your Grace. There are no observers close enough to hear. I never offer empty compliments, Miss Jennings. It wastes my time and insults the recipient's intelligence. The music drew to a close, and the Duke led her from the dance floor toward her parents. Throughout the evening, he remained attentive, dancing with her twice more, exactly the right number to show interest without impropriety, and introducing her to several of his friends. By the time they departed, Katherine knew their charade had been successful. The whispers following them were no longer of pity but of speculation and intrigue. The jilted bride had been transformed into the object of ducal interest, and society's assessment of her value had risen accordingly. In the carriage returning home, Katherine found herself unexpectedly tired. The strain of maintaining a poised facade all evening had taken its toll. You were magnificent, the Duke said quietly. Every eye in the room was upon you, and not one person dared express pity. Thank you, Katherine replied. Though I confess, I shall be glad when this deception can be honorably concluded. Something flickered in the Duke's expression, or surprise? Disappointment? But it vanished so quickly that Katherine thought she must have imagined it. Of course, he said smoothly. Another 3 weeks should suffice. By then, your reputation will be fully rehabilitated. Katherine nodded, ignoring the strange hollow feeling that accompanied the thought of ending their arrangement. It was absurd to feel anything but relief at the prospect of returning to her normal life. Yet as the days passed, normal began to seem less appealing. The Duke's regular visits had become a highlight of Katherine's week. Their conversations ranged from literature to politics to childhood memories, each revealing new facets of his character that contradicted his public image as an aloof, disinterested aristocrat. During a drive in the park, as spring sunshine filtered through the new green leaves, Katherine found herself laughing at the Duke's description of his first disastrous attempt at riding to hounds. Truly, I ended up hanging from a tree branch while my horse continued the chase without me, he concluded. My father was mortified. I cannot imagine you as anything but accomplished, Katherine admitted. You seem so confident in everything you do. An illusion carefully cultivated. His smile held a touch of self-deprecation. We are all performing to some degree, are we not? Presenting the version of ourselves that society expects. The observation struck Katherine forcibly. Yes, I suppose we are. Though in our case, the performance is more literal than most. The Duke's expression grew thoughtful. Is it? I find myself wondering if this arrangement has not revealed more truth than falsehood. Before Katherine could ask what he meant, they encountered Lady Harford driving with her daughter, necessitating an exchange of greetings and pleasantries that ended their private conversation. That evening, a letter arrived for Katherine. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and she opened it with curiosity that quickly turned to dismay. Dear Miss Jennings, you may be surprised to receive correspondence from me, but I feel compelled to warn you about the Duke of Stanwick. While his title and fortune make him appear an eligible match, those of us who know him well understand that his interest in you can only be temporary. His Grace has a pattern of brief, intense attachments followed by sudden indifference. Ask yourself why a man of his position would suddenly show interest in a lady who was so recently jilted. Is it not more likely that you represent a novelty, a distraction from his usual pursuits? I write not to cause pain but to spare you further humiliation. Society may currently applaud your apparent triumph, but when the Duke's interest inevitably wanes, you will face even greater ridicule than before. A concerned friend. Katherine's hands trembled as she set down the letter. The anonymous writer had articulated her own secret fears, that she was merely an amusing diversion for the Duke, a temporary project undertaken on a whim. When the Duke called the following day, Katherine found herself watching him with new wariness. Was there calculation behind his charm? Was his apparent enjoyment of her company merely skilled acting? You seem distracted today, he observed as they sat in the drawing-room. Is something amiss? Katherine hesitated, then decided directness was required. She handed him the letter. This arrived yesterday. The Duke read it quickly, his expression darkening. Malicious nonsense. Though I can guess the author, Lady Harwick, I suspect. She has never forgiven me for refusing to propose to her niece. Is there truth to the accusation? About your pattern of brief, intense attachments. The Duke set the letter aside. I have never trifled with any lady's affections, if that's the implication. I have enjoyed female companionship, certainly, but always with clear understanding on both sides. And our arrangement? Is it merely a novelty, a distraction from your usual pursuits? The Duke's gaze was steady. Our arrangement began as I stated, a mutual convenience to protect your reputation and shield me from unwanted attention. But I find myself increasingly unsatisfied with its limitations. Katherine's heart quickened. What do you mean? I mean that I enjoy your company far more than I anticipated. I find myself thinking of things to tell you when we are apart. I look forward to your perspective on matters I previously considered only from my own viewpoint. He leaned forward slightly. In short, Miss Jennings, what began as pretense has developed, on my part at least, genuine sentiment. Katherine stared at him, searching for any sign of insincerity. Your Grace, Richard, he corrected gently. Surely after these weeks, you might use my given name, at least in private. Richard, she said, the name feeling strange and intimate on her tongue. I don't know what to say. This was not part of our agreement. No, it was not. Feelings rarely conform to rational agreements. He smiled ruefully. If it helps, I am as surprised as you are. Katherine rose and moved to the window, needing physical distance to think clearly. I have been deceived before by charming words and attentive behavior. I swore I would never again mistake practiced gallantry for genuine regard. The Duke, Richard, remained seated, allowing her the space she sought. A reasonable caution. May I ask, then, what would convince you of genuine regard? Not today, perhaps, or tomorrow. But eventually. The question caught her off guard. No man had ever asked her what proof of affection she required. They had simply offered what they assumed would impress her, compliments, flowers, Poetry. Time, she said finally, turning back to face him. Consistency of character. Evidence that your interest persists even when it no longer serves any social purpose. Richard nodded slowly. Fair conditions. Will you allow me to demonstrate these qualities? Not as part of our charade, but in earnest. The request was so unexpected, so contrary to everything Katherine had come to believe about men and marriage, that she found herself momentarily speechless. I will consider it, she said at last, her voice steadier than she felt. But I make no promises. I ask for none. Only the opportunity to show you that not all men are like Pemberton, or your first disappointment. After he departed, Katherine sat alone, trying to make sense of the conversation. Could the Duke of Stanwick truly have developed feelings for her? It seemed improbable. He could have his pick of younger, more beautiful, more accomplished women. Yet there had been a sincerity in his manner that was difficult to dismiss. Over the following days, subtle changes in Richard's behavior lent credence to his declaration. His calls became more frequent, his letters more personal. He brought books they had discussed, remembered details she had mentioned in passing, and gradually introduced her to his closest friends and family members, people unlikely to be part of a mere social charade. At a musicale hosted by Lady Stanwick, Richard surprised Katherine by requesting that she play the pianoforte. Though not exceptionally talented, Katherine had always enjoyed music, and the piece she performed, Mozart's Sonata in C, was one she had practiced diligently. Beautiful, Richard murmured when she finished, having stood beside her to turn the pages. You play with genuine feeling. Not exceptional technique, I fear, Katherine replied with a self-deprecating smile. Technique can be taught. Emotional understanding cannot. Later that evening, as they walked in Lady Stanwick's garden, Richard broached a subject Katherine had been avoiding. Our courtship has now lasted nearly the full month we agreed upon, he said, his voice careful. Society has completely accepted the narrative we created. Your reputation is not only restored but enhanced. Katherine nodded, her heart beating faster. Yes, I believe we have achieved our objective. Then by our original agreement, we should now orchestrate an amicable parting. Yes, Katherine said again, though the word felt oddly painful. Richard stopped walking and turned to face her. Is that what you wish to do? The question hung in the air between them. Katherine looked up at him, at the face that had become so familiar and dear to her over these weeks. The thought of no longer seeing him regularly, of ending their conversations and companionship, created an ache she had not anticipated. What do you wish? She countered, unwilling to reveal her own feelings first. Richard took her gloved hand in his. I wish to continue courting you, Katherine. Not as a pretense but with honorable intentions. I find I have no desire to return to my bachelor existence if it means losing your company. Katherine's breath caught. You cannot mean I do. His blue eyes were utterly serious. I began this arrangement believing myself immune to matrimonial intentions. I was wrong. But surely you could make a more advantageous match. A younger bride from a more elevated family. I have no interest in advantageous matches. I want a partner who challenges me intellectually, who makes me laugh, who sees beyond the title to the man beneath. He squeezed her hand gently. I want you, Katherine. If you will have me. For a moment, all of Katherine's carefully constructed defenses threatened to crumble. The sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, everything suggested he was in earnest. But the memory of past disappointment held her back. I need time, she said quietly. This is so unexpected. Of course. Richard released her hand. I would not press you for an immediate answer. Take all the time you require." As they returned to the house, Catherine's thoughts whirled in confusion. She had entered their arrangement believing love was a luxury she would never experience, that practical considerations must guide her choice of husband. Now, faced with the possibility of a marriage that might include both practical advantage and genuine affection, she found herself afraid to trust it. The following week brought the Merton Ball, one of the most anticipated events of the season. Katherine attended with her parents, aware that Richard would be present and that their public interaction would be closely observed. The ballroom was ablaze with hundreds of candles, the elite of society dressed in their finest. Katherine wore a new gown of deep blue silk that Lady Stanwick had insisted on gifting her, claiming the color matched Richard's eyes precisely. When Richard approached to claim his dance, a waltz, the whispers around them intensified. For weeks of his attentions had convinced many that a proposal was imminent. Katherine herself felt the weight of expectation as he led her onto the floor. "You look troubled," Richard observed as they began to dance. "Has something happened?" Katherine hesitated, then decided to be forthright. "I received a visitor this morning, Lady Harwick." Richard's expression darkened. "I see. And what did she want?" "To inform me that you were merely trifling with me. That your interest was a passing fancy, motivated by the novelty of pursuing someone who had been publicly jilted." Spiteful nonsense. "I hope you gave her no credence." "Not entirely," Katherine admitted. "But she did mention something that gave me pause. She claimed that you had once been deeply in love with a lady who rejected you for another, and that since then, you have deliberately avoided serious attachments." Richard's steps faltered momentarily before he recovered. "There is some truth in that," he said after a moment. "When I was 22, I offered for Lady Elizabeth Montague. She refused me in favor of the Earl of Wexford." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly. "That must have been painful." "It was, at the time. Pride as much as heart, in retrospect. But it did make me wary of romantic entanglements." His gaze met hers directly. "Until now. What has changed?" Katherine asked, her voice barely audible above the music. "I have. And perhaps circumstances." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Elizabeth wanted a different life than I could offer. You and I believe, want the same things: intellectual companionship, mutual respect, a partnership of equals." The music drew to a close, and Katherine found herself reluctant to leave his arms. "And if I were to believe you, to trust this change of heart, what then?" Richard's eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. "Then I would ask you to marry me. Not here, not now, with hundreds watching. But soon, privately, when you are ready to hear it." The remainder of the ball passed in a blur for Katherine. She danced with other partners, made conversation, smiled at the right moments, but her mind was entirely occupied with Richard's words. Could she trust him? Could she trust her own feelings? When she returned home that night, she found herself unable to sleep. Rising early the next morning, she wrote a note to Richard asking him to meet her in Hyde Park for a morning ride. She needed to speak with him away from observing eyes and listening ears. They met at the fashionable hour of 10, when the park was busy enough to provide propriety but spacious enough to allow private conversation as they rode. Richard looked particularly handsome on horseback, his tall figure and confident seat drawing admiring glances from passing ladies. "You wish to speak with me?" he asked once they had exchanged greetings. Katherine guided her mare alongside his stallion, her heart pounding. "Yes. I have been thinking about what you said last night, about us wanting the same things. And I believe you may be right. But there is something I need to know first." She drew a deep breath. "When we began this charade, you said you had reasons beyond helping me. What were they? Richard's expression grew serious. The truth? My aunt had issued an ultimatum. Either I must show genuine interest in finding a wife this season, or she would rewrite her will to exclude me from inheriting her considerable fortune. Katherine stared at him. So this was all about money after all. No, he said quickly. Please, let me finish. Yes, my aunt's ultimatum prompted me to consider the appearance of courtship. But I chose you specifically because I had noticed you before, at the Millington Music Hall last winter, and again at Lady Jersey's rout. You were different from the other ladies, thoughtful, observant. You listened more than you spoke, but when you did speak, your words had substance. You noticed me before my wedding day? Katherine asked, astonished. I did. Though I had no intention of acting on that interest until circumstances intervened. He guided his horse closer to hers. The irony is that by pretending to court you to satisfy my aunt, I discovered that I genuinely wished to court you for myself. Katherine absorbed this information slowly. So you did have ulterior motives? Initially, yes. But they became irrelevant almost immediately. His expression was earnest. Katherine, I understand your hesitation. You have been deceived before, and our beginning was unorthodox at best. But I am asking you to judge me by my actions since then, not by my initial motivations. They had reached a less populated section of the park. Katherine reined in her horse beneath the shade of an oak tree, and Richard did the same. My entire life, she said quietly, I have been taught that marriage is a practical arrangement. That romantic love is a pleasant notion for novels but has little place in real alliances. That a woman in my position, neither young, nor beautiful, nor exceedingly wealthy, should be grateful for any respectable offer. Richard frowned. Those are society's constraints, not truths. Perhaps. But they shaped my expectations. I accepted Pemberton because he represented my last chance at a conventional life. She looked directly at him. I cannot bear to be pitied, Richard. If your offer springs from kindness rather than genuine regard, it does not, he interrupted firmly. Whatever brought us together, my feelings for you are real. You are intelligent, principled, and far more beautiful than you give yourself credit for. He dismounted and came to stand beside her horse, looking up at her. Katherine Jennings, I am not offering you a refuge from spinsterhood or a shield from society's judgment. I am offering you my heart, imperfect as it may be. Will you accept it? Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. In that moment, all her carefully constructed defenses, her cynicism about marriage, her distrust of romantic declarations, her belief that love was not for women like her, began to crumble. With trembling hands, she allowed Richard to help her dismount. Standing face to face with him, she saw nothing but sincerity in his expression. Yes, she whispered. I will accept your heart, if you will accept mine in return. Richard's smile was radiant as he took both her hands in his. Nothing would make me happier. Even though our beginning was a charade. Especially because of that. We built something real from pretense, surely that proves its worth. His eyes twinkled. Besides, what a story to tell our grandchildren. Katherine laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised her with its freedom. Lady Stanwick will be insufferably pleased with herself. Undoubtedly. She has been dropping hints about Stanwick's need for a mistress since our third meeting. He lifted her hand to his lips. Shall we make her day and announce our engagement at her dinner party tomorrow? I believe that would be entirely appropriate, Katherine agreed, happiness bubbling through her like champagne. As they remounted their horses to continue their ride, now officially engaged, Katherine marveled at the turns her life had taken. 1 month ago, she had been abandoned at the altar, certain her last chance at happiness had vanished. Now she rode beside a man who valued her mind as well as her person, who had seen beyond society's narrow assessment of her worth. "A penny for your thoughts," Richard said, guiding his horse alongside hers. Katherine smiled at him, her heart full. "I was thinking that being forgotten on my wedding day was perhaps the most fortunate event of my life." "For us both," Richard agreed, his blue eyes warm with promise. "For us both."